mean, is there evidence, real evidence, that that transferring management from public control to private control increases efficiency? That's a little tricky, because when you begin to look, you find a lot of other things.
Of course you do. With all the turmoil that's happening in the US government, with Elon Musk's Doge, and the fear of certain departments like Social Security being forced into privatisation, it's interesting to reflect back on these wise words on whether privatisation has any benefits to the general public, from Noam Chomsky.
For example, in what you find is that in places where the society sort of functions kind of more or less honestly and well, you know, say Sweden or Chile for that matter, public institutions are pretty efficient. So there is no pressure in Chile to privatize the biggest exporter because it's very efficient. Where there's pressure to privatize, it's usually coming from private power, okay, not on grounds of efficiency. And in fact, if you look at the effects, it's very unclear what they are. So I mean, take, say, the Brazilian steel industry. I mean, it was nationalized, always ran at a loss. Okay, so it looks inefficient by some measure. On the other hand, part of the reason it was running at a loss was because it was purposely, by state policy, producing steel cheaply for the benefit of private manufacturers. So it was a public subsidy to private manufacturers, which made the steel industry look inefficient, right? But for the economy, it might not at all have been inefficient. And in fact, case after case, when you look at privatization, you find an extremely mixed picture. What you usually find is transfer of costs to the public. So take, say, privatization of roads. Well, you know, privatization of roads would mean you'd pay tolls if you're rich enough, and you'd go on nice highways. And if you're not rich enough to pay the tolls, well, you know, find your way down a dirt rut somewhere. You know, the total, you know, the economy might look much better. Gross national product would go up, macroeconomic statistics would look good. Most of the people would be terrible. Actually, the biggest privatization in history probably is the internet and the whole telecommunication system. Here is a system developed at public expense, which is being given. You know, it's not even sold. It's privatization. Sometimes they sell it for something. Here we just give it away, you know, to private power. So that's huge privatization. But in third world countries, I suppose the main case is Mexico. And in fact, yeah, it's true, the Mexican telephone company and so on, they're getting privatized. And you're getting a couple hundred billionaires, you know, service isn't improving except for the rich, getting a small number of billionaires. Wages and incomes have collapsed by, you know, depends how you measure, but maybe 50% during the liberalization period. In 1995, right after the collapse, GNP went down by about 8 or 9%, still not recovering. Yeah, that's privatization.
Click here for Bernie Sanders versus trickle-down economics.